r/Askreddit by Reddit and chill. People who have survived school shootings. What was it like? Serious. I was around for Elliot Rogers shooting at UCSB. There are a few things that I remember being surprising. The sense of humor. This was not everyone. But I remember a couple people making finger gun gestures at each other. I think this is because the event lasted a while and spread over the Isla Vista area. So there was a general discomfort wherever you were. I think people were coping with the stress however you could. Gallows humor. Basically, the awkwardness of trying to console someone who just saw their friends shot or were shot at themselves. If you have ever been in a social situation where you didn't know what to say, add in the fact that whatever you say might permanently affect the life of the person you are talking to. Your school is now famous for this. Although this was during a time that school shootings weren't super common. So that might be changing. Lived in the same dorm, Manzanita, as two of the victims. One being across the hall from my room. Seeing the parents get escorted to their children's rooms was goddamn haunting. During the actual shooting, I was in downtown SB at a birthday dinner. We were getting calls and texts from many of our friends not to come back to the area as it was happening. I was at UCLA during the shooting in 2016. It was only a disgruntled grad student shooting his advisor and then himself. But we didn't know that at the time. Everyone was assuming it was a mass. I was walking back to my apartment just off campus when the notification went out that there were reports of gunshots and to get inside because campus was locking down. I finished walking home and turned on the news with some friends. I had other friends who were hiding in classrooms. The craziest part was the amount of misinformation going around on social media and in various group messages I was a part of. There were reports of more people shot and multiple shooters in a coordinated attack around various parts of campus and such. I'm not sure how much of that was fabricated maliciously and how much started with someone seeing a plainclothes officer with a gun or something and the story snowballing from there. I called my mom afterward and she started crying. She said she hadn't called me sooner because she didn't want my phone to ring in case I was in hiding. Honestly, really smart of your mom. I was a student at Virginia Tech during the 2007 massacre. I wasn't directly in the fire or anything. Just a student in the dorms. It was very surreal. That morning my friends and I sat in the dorms watching the news evolve on campus. It started off saying 1 or 2 injured. At that point we didn't make too much of the situation. I remember the newscaster saying at one point that the new updates was over 20 fatalities. The final count was 32. And we all just froze. We assumed it was an error. It was not. As the day evolved we reached out to our friends to make sure they were okay. But cell service was very spotty. I had a very uneasy feeling that a somewhat peripheral friend of mine was in danger and tried to text her. It turns out she was shot, but survived. Another of our friends was shot and killed. The next few days were strange. Classes were cancelled and many left the campus. President Bush came to speak to us. But I'm sure even he felt helpless with not much to contribute. Eventually, they cancelled the remainder of classes and exams for the semester and we left for the year. The summer was difficult. At my summer job people kept trying to talk to me about the shooting. Both co-workers and customers. I don't know why. But I felt okay discussing it with fellow VT students but nobody else. Including my other friends and family. I eventually quit that job and got a new one. Not telling anyone I was a VT student. That day, I'll always say, is the day I grew from a child to adult. I changed in ways both positive and negative. I made new bonds with my fellow classmates but felt isolated from some other people. It was definitely the defining experience of my young adulthood. For a long time, I didn't want to talk about these experiences with anyone. Now, I try and speak more openly about it because I am trying to advocate for a better future. I was a NRV resident at the time of the shooting and went to a school less than an hour from Virginia Tech. As an adult I went to Virginia Tech and honestly felt a little bad about missing the 10-year anniversary. While there, I actually was a classmate with an aerospace engineering student who was 30 years old. The reason was that he'd been 20 when the shooting had occurred. And due to the disruption of classes coupled with his own difficulties with the shootings, had decided to leave entirely. 10 years later he was getting back to it. Survivor of the SHS shooting here. I was 9 at the time and in 4th grade. I was in the gym. And we were just going through the normal routine, that is, the gym teacher explaining the activity and us participating. I remember it was rope climbing that day and I was so excited. All of a sudden we heard a loud bang noise. And everyone looked towards the door. At first we shrugged it off as the janitor dropping something in the hallway. But after the second and third bangs we were ushered into the corner and told to be very quiet while my teacher ran and locked the doors. We were confused but unbothered at first. But the longer it went on the more worried we became. The loudspeaker crackled on and we heard muffled voices and muffled bangs. Then silence. Years later I was told it was our principal and the office staff trying to warn us. But were killed. By now we were all silently sobbing and holding hands. I remember being very scared but not entirely sure of what. Of course, a school shooting was not the first thing on our minds. Eventually my teacher told us to crawl across the floor and into a supply closet, where we sat terrified until SWAT and police officers opened the doors and helped us out. We went out one of the back doors and walked the drive to the firehouse, where our parents picked us up and took us home. That experience has changed me forever, and while the effects I had initially, nightmares, anxiety, etc., have lessened, I still feel them. I and many others suffer from PTSD and I don't think a day goes by where I don't think about it. While I did not know everyone who passed personally, I have seen the toll it took on my community and feel for their families and friends deeply. R.I.P. angels. You are loved. I also heard rumors that survivors were kinda getting harassed by other people, accusing them that the SHS shooting was a hoax and that survivors were getting badgered by these crazy people accusing them that it was all some stage media conspiracy. Have you had to deal with any people like that since? Anyone not believe you that the shooting happened? I find it absolutely crazy that people have the nerve to say it's fake to the face of a survivor. I live nearby in NY and my father used to work with the SHS shooter's dad. My dad told me that day FBI came to grab the shooter's father for questioning on the job and my dad spoke with him that day as he was finding out what his son did. It was totally tragic. I go to Saugus High School and was at school during the most recent school shooting that happened 2 or 3 weeks ago. I'll start from the beginning. I got to school at probably around 7:10 because I am Mormon, so I had a class called seminary, basically Bible study, and so we ended and I walked to school. I walked in and went towards the back of campus-ish, but I could still see where it took place in the quad. I'm just chilling there with my friends when I look over and see some kid walking really quickly towards the middle of the quad, and it happened so quickly. He was crying, I think. He ripped his backpack around and I just knew there something was wrong. He reached in and shot a girl in front of him. I won't say her name but I knew her quite well, and she was instantly dead, I'm pretty sure. At that point I don't remember much. I just ran. And I ran and I ran and I ran until I collapsed on the sidewalk outside of school and some parent came and helped me up. Scariest moment of my life. I knew the kid that was the shooter. I knew the girl that died. I knew one of the injured. I'm still dealing with it today and it has honestly made me so scared. A chair fell and I just sat in my room for a couple hours. I hope no one ever has to deal with anything like that ever. I'm sorry about that and I'm so glad nothing like that happened at my school. I hope that things get better for you and I'm sorry about your friend. One of my college professor's wives was teacher at Sandy Hook during the shooting. She survived. But I remember reading an essay she had written about the ordeal. And a line stuck out. I remember talking to our principal that morning. When I turned to head to my classroom, I didn't know that would be the last time I'd see her alive. Still gives me chills to this day. Then about a year or so after the shooting, I was taking a psychology class. One day, we did a therapy session support group. A girl in my class burst into tears when she described attending the funeral of one of the slain children and described how tiny the casket was. She also would see the perpetrator in her high school halls and, while she hated stereotyping people, she always felt a very creepy vibe from him. The tiny casket from my baby brother's funeral still haunts me. Nothing can really prepare you for that. I was in the room when one student shot another at our high school then ran out of the building. This was the 80s, so there was no lockdown procedure. We all just left the building in various states of shock. I never felt threatened, so it really didn't affect me too badly. The victim lived and the shooter spent several years in the Indiana Youth Center with Mike Tyson and one of my best friends from high school. That's a bizarre sentence for you. Wait, was your friend the victim or the shooter? It was really scary. Everyone was panicking and running into the nearest classroom. And I ended up getting locked out of every room. I was out in the open with a shooter who could come from any direction. My teacher, amazing guy, looked out and saw me sitting in the middle of the hallway, silently crying. The hall was dead silent. And I heard a click. And nearly screamed, thinking it was the shooter coking a handgun. I looked up and realized my teacher had popped the door open a tiny bit. I ran fast as duck into the class, about to pass out from fear. And my teacher just held on to me the whole time. After everything went down, nobody got hurt. Except the shooter, who took 3 bullets in the leg from the cops. My teacher almost got fired for jeopardizing 31 kids' lives to save one. But the school held a petition and he got to keep his job. That must have been so scary. I can't even imagine. May I ask how old you were? I hid in a department closet for a few hours with some girls I barely knew because I met them by yelling "There's a shooter on campus" at them. We sobbed and texted our loved ones until police escorted us out of the building after catching the guy. To this day I am a lot more anxious and depressed. I haven't been able to complete a college class since the event. I am scared to be on campus. If you haven't already, please consider talking to a professional about this. What you experienced is a serious trauma and you don't deserve to live the rest of your life scared. You deserve to feel as safe as possible all the time. And you deserve to be able to access education. I went to school next to a school shooting. It was our sister school, so everyone from school A kinda knew everyone from school B. The morning it happened, I remember watching all the teachers in our back hallway gather around and huddled together. I made eye contact with one of them, who was visibly very distressed. I turned to the kid next to me and said something serious is happening, and he laughed and said I was paranoid. Turns out I wasn't. They didn't tell us anything. They tried to hide the whole fact. But since so many people had connections to the other school, we all found out quickly. We went on loose lockdown, so no going outside. Which I still find odd. But whatever. 4 kids died. Personally, I wasn't in the shooting. But I am still a little shaken. That previous weekend, I met a kid who was very cute and I was debating getting his number. I didn't because I was shy. But the morning it happened, I was thinking of him and what if we had been texting and blah blah because I'm 14 and had major crushes. I came to find out he was one of the kids who died. That still kinda haunts me. Holy shit, that last paragraph is haunting. My brother was also there. Science wing. 2nd floor. I remember being in my tech class in middle school and getting a call from my mom, who was sobbing through the words "There's been a shooting." I remember it being nothing short of surreal. Almost as if it wasn't really happening. I was in the STEM shooting. We heard 5 shots and sat in a corner for a little while, then some yelling. I heard some guy moaning in pain outside, then a bullet came through the wall and scratched my friend. We left to another corner, then there were 2 more shots. I was texting friends and family and my friend texted me, "Wanna play 8-ball pool?" The cops removed us. There was blood in the halls. We stood around in the cold for a couple hours. A friend of mine got shot in the leg 3 times, though she's okay now. Both of them are. My friend texted me, "Wanna play 8-ball pool?" I understand this was traumatic. And not a laughing matter at all. But goddamn, that made me laugh. My then boyfriend was in the building 1 floor up from the 2014 shooting at Purdue. I was at work and heard the live news talking about it. Tried to text him and no response. Cell phones were jammed. I vomited from anxiety. So they made me leave work. Later that day, when the police let everyone leave the building and the details came out, he called and told me that he'd heard the shot. Just sounded like a loud bang. He had trouble sleeping for the next few months. And bought a handgun for his home soon after. Said it made him feel safer to have it around. We Are Columbine is an interesting documentary on Hulu. It covers how some students dealt with the aftermath of it. This wasn't a Columbine-style shooting, just two morons arguing over a chain. My high school had the football field right next to the student parking lot. The other three sides of the field were a very steep hill. On one side, at the top of the hill, a mall. At the time, here's how it went down. During football practice we heard gunshots and then everybody started running up the hill. I followed. At the top of the hill into the mall parking lot. Some guy was bleeding, but he had been stabbed, not shot. He wandered off. After about 10 minutes, coach told us to get back on the field. Whoever made it up the hill first was starting the next game. Turns out, these two wannabe gangbanger dongheads were arguing over a chain. And their idiotic cronies decided this is a good reason for a brawl. Somebody brought out a shotgun. Because they are all ducking morons. Luckily didn't shoot anyone, but it dispersed the situation nicely. Sounds like a wonderful educational institution. A shooting happens at the school. But the administration has their knickers in a twist about the personal life of the victim being bad PR for their school. I felt my eyebrows rise as I read that. Ducking, like and subscribe.